Hi, I'm Rob Price, and I'm talking to some inspirational leaders of some of the leading AI and Gen AI businesses in the world. Welcome to Futurise.
So my name's Nicolai Thompson. I'm originally from South Africa. I did most of my schooling in the UK, and I've done stints in both corporate and startups. I was had the luxury of living and working in New Zealand for a while, but a real common theme that's has always impressed upon me is just how manual and hard it is to spend company money, and that was really like the genesis, excuse the pun, of why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Fantastic. And just to expand on that a bit, and the reason why I was interested, I mean, you're very focused around an aspect of, well, the finance function of any business. So relevant
Mm.
across the piece. But tell us a bit more about what Genesys is doing.
Yeah, so first it's like where this all started. So I mean, 24 years ago, I did my first expense claim, and I think anyone who's been involved in the non-finance side of spending company money will feel the pain of expense claims. And it was around 2015, 2016 that I first got a much better understanding of just how much manual work gets created for finance when you kind of leave people to it. And that's really how this all started. And when we started asking finance teams like, hey, we could use generative AI to allow people inside the business to write to you and say, hey, I need to spend money on this, or like, what's the balance of my budget? Because all that data already exists, right? And so it's just about making it accessible. And the teams turned around and said, well, the problem is that the budgets aren't up to date. Well, why aren't they? Well, because we haven't reconciled all the invoices yet. And so that just takes a period of time. And very quickly we realized that things like horrible things which affect all businesses, like payment terms, are mostly like they're to do with cash flow, but it's because a company, it takes a long time to get to a position where, yeah, this is approved, it's been through the process, and it can now be paid. And that's why we started in a really specific place of saying, all right, there seems to be a problem back in the sort of the engine room of reconciliation, and the world's businesses have to hire or outsource to accounting partners the access to people, bookkeepers, who have been trained and understand the context of what was purchased so that you can correctly report that. And that has significant implications downstream for your VAT or GST, depending on what tax you are in the world, but also your P&L and your corporate tax. So it's a pretty major area. It's something which like accountants are accountable for, but it's kind of the dirty part of finance, the bit that nobody actually likes to do, and the most corners get cut, which is where fraud also starts to get exposed. So there's lots of like things that fall out of this one task that kicks off when an invoice arrives at a business.
And how have you found talking to organizations or people in financial functions about it? Because I'm interested that a lot of people naturally think around generative AI in the context of image creation or video
Mm,
creation or text creation. At the heart
yeah.
of the finance function isn't necessarily where I imagine a lot of people's thoughts are at in the context of Gen AI. So how have you
Yeah.
found it?
You absolutely hit the nail on the head, and it's why until this technology becomes as accessible, that this particular part of every business, financial operations, has had very little AI or machine learning or any kind of technology um, created since really you got to go back to the 90s where original like OCR optical character recognition was created to read semi-structured data like invoices, and it's still being used today. And when we started this process, we actually went out and looked at all the different OCR providers, and there's probably about half a dozen really decent established players around the world that most apps kind of tap into. And we bought access to all of them, and we were just shocked at how crap they were, to be honest. But it's not surprising. And so our first challenge was was building a vision transformer to give an LLM eyes and understanding, so that we can then make use of fine tuning, so that we can actually train it to be a specialist at reconciling. And those two had to go together. And so we've actually called it an accounting language model, so an ALM, not an LLM. And I think over the next few years, there'll be an explosion in regulated industries like accounting, finance, legal, where you're going to have specialists. And we've learned a hell of a lot over the last 12 months of some of the nuances of how to build a specialist, especially when it comes to governance.
And I think, I mean, in a sense, you jumped on to another question that I've got as a burning thing in my mind, which was around the whole ethics and responsibility and compliance angle of it. Because, as you say, in the space that you're operating, people are going to care that whatever is recommended, suggested, done is right and
Yeah.
auditable. So how's your approach been to thinking about responsible use of the AI, generative AI, as part of the solutions? And have you needed to do something different, therefore, to give people the comfort that it's going to be okay in an audited space?
Yeah, since January 22, when we started coding, we've rebuilt Jack 3 times. So Jack is what we call the AI. Yeah, it's been rebuilt 3 times. 2 of them were because of issues with character, and we were kind of learning. We were trying to figure out how to give it a tone of voice, so that if you spoke to it, quite aggressively, or you were just all about the detail, don't give me the waffle, that it would respond in kind. Also to match a sort of company's tone of voice for the sort of more their corporate marketing type stuff. And we learnt a lot about how all of a sudden Jack, if it was giving short, sharp answers, would start reflecting the kind of content that it was originally trained on, which may be not extreme, but was written by people that just were angry. And we found that as a theme, which we had to figure out how to deal with and how to do that. And we fine-tune open source models. Most effective thing we found is that we had to retrain it. Like, quite often these models have only been trained 1 times, and so we've had to get creative with access to powerful enough GPUs to train it again, and basically train out its influence of, if someone talks aggressively, that it gets aggressive back, because it's Jack's whole character and demeanor changed and becomes quickly something that you don't trust or you don't like. And this is a tool which in time will be a bridge between finance and the rest of the business, because it's the data that Jack has. Things like, I know all of your company's policies, I know all of the regulations, I know the rules, the laws of different parts of the world, wherever you may be trading and doing business. And no human is expected to know that off the top of their head, which is why there's so many breaches of compliance and audit issues and fraud that kind of can result from this. And so we had to figure out how to do that, and that was a pretty challenging part of probably around April through June last year.
Cool. So who's buying it, in terms of who are you looking to sell to? Is it the FD? Is it people within the team? Is it the tech guys? Who's got the most interest when you're talking to an organization about its adoption?
So it's 2 parts to that. So the customer that we are selling to right now, that I mean, if we can get in front of someone and give a demo, we're winning kind of 80%. And those are partners in accounting practices. So typically, yes, sort of maybe upper part of small business, but mid-tier companies that have outsourced transactional accounting. Many of these firms have also outsourced their own part of this transactional accounting reconciliation offshore. And there's been wildly different experiences. Inconsistency seems to be the big theme. When you put someone's books and invoices in front of a floor of 200 bookkeepers overseas, you're going to get 200 different opinions on certain things, and so some stuff takes longer to get to be highly accurate, and so sometimes the cost savings don't actually result. So Some companies are just accepting lower quality, but that's now starting to come home to roost because at the end of the day, this is a regulated activity. You cock it up, and like there are consequences.
And have you found that the sales process is something that's a relatively quick decision? You're targeted on a specific thing, something that, or actually, is it taking a number of iterations because of that uncertainty of generative AI in that regulated compliant space?
Yeah, it's not taking too long. So because our use of generative AI is actually to read what's on an invoice, there's not the same like, oh, you have to learn how to be a prompt engineer or anything like that.
Yeah,
It's sort of you open the box and you stick an invoice into it, and within 30 seconds, so the average is 22 seconds, Jack will complete a reconciliation that a simple reconciliation will take a human 3 minutes. A more complex one, you're sort of starting to talk 7 or 8 minutes. Um, and so that's really when kind of the accountants have a sort of mouth drop open moment, and they realize that Jack can complete 120 transactions, reconciliations in an hour. And so and we price per hour to make it really simple to compare the cost of hiring somebody, whether it's onshore, offshore, it doesn't really matter.
yeah.
When we do have conversations with like FDs in industry outside of accounting partners, and the biggest thing that they ask questions about is how is this going to help me be more compliant, um, and sort of stop me from getting in trouble in my organization, and that really is highly connected to you put company policies, and some companies have got reams of them into Jack, and within about 48 hours, Jack's starting to give you results. And so the product, which isn't released yet, but it is earmarked for 2025, because there's only so much we can do in this period of time. But post payment audit, there's a lot of big companies that we've spoken to who some spend a lot of money, some spend no money and just accept fraud. But when you talk to the likes of PwC, yeah, they fundamentally believe that about 3% of costs are fraudulent, and the bigger the company, the bigger the number, and it is a pretty major number. The cost of fraud is actually a lot higher than anyone spends on tools in this market, or how we would sort of look at, well, what's this market worth? What's the TAM? Like the cost of fraud makes that look like chicken feed.
I think it goes back to your earlier point. It's a part of the operating model that maybe has had well-established systems for many years, that therefore you need that mix of people who understand that set of processes inside out, and equally
Mm,
understand the art of the possible in terms of new technologies that are literally changing every month.
yeah.
I guess a lot of people are in that position of having to have redeveloped their tech stack a number of times even over the last year in that sense. How have you
But
found it in
but
terms of
also
kind of,
like I was just going to add, like this aspect of generative AI, what this is going to allow is that beyond just transformation of the tech stack, you're also talking about a reevaluating human capital. And so our core message and what this unlocks is saying those humans that you hire that are operators of tools that you keep transforming and buying better tools, you still need the humans to operate them. And AI is going to be this wave that's going to help AI become the operator, and the human is going to become the validator and the strategist, which is going to make a huge difference to businesses. It's going to elevate the value of finance more than it's ever done before. And I hope, like the dream is to see companies making better decisions faster, putting like real time budget data into the hands of approvers all around the world, so that you're making a decision to spend company money with good data, with knowing your actual financial position, not waiting until a week after month end close to be like, oh, you were over budget. Like, yeah, what a surprise.
and in a sense, we often talk and have talked on previous episodes around accelerating and augmenting, helping people to make decisions better,
Mm,
faster, enabling them to spend more time on the things that, as you say, more strategic or otherwise. I
Yeah.
mean, is that the ambition? I mean, my final question was going to be around your ambition, your hopes for Genesys. Part of that is undoubtedly going to be around that reimagining of the finance function and the way it engages with the business. But what else would you add?
What I would add is that to go to all this effort of kind of changing the way that financial operations run, our real dream and vision here is that we want to get rid of payment terms. Like between in the supply chain between buyers and suppliers. Buyers, especially the bigger the company, the worse it gets. But payment terms are often the reason why businesses die. Profitable businesses can be killed because cash flow is bad. And payment terms are quite often the root cause. And I mean, there's two key components here. One is that a company takes a while to actually do their reconciliations and go through their internal processes and approvals and blah 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 blah. And the second is that the buyer is also protecting their own cash flow position. And like I want to only pay for this 30, 60, 90 days, but like we've talked with firms in certain industries where 90 and 120 days is the norm. And then I was absolutely shocked to find out that 180-day payment terms are really common in supermarkets. And like that's a fast moving consumer good. Like that is not a reason why you need something sitting on someone else's balance sheet because it's going to take you ages to get cash. That is a very, very short time to get cash. And we want to make available instant payments that a supplier for the cost of a credit card, that's the target, basically 2%, can be paid instantly if Jack has essentially approved the invoice, that it has looked at all of the conditions from a policy point of view. It can see the approval trails. It has its ability, and that ties very closely in with governance. Like we've had to figure out how you write governance as outcome statements. We find that's what's worked best, so that you kind of give it a playing field and say, here's the playing field, like go. And that's our big wish, actually, is that a small supplier can do business with a big company that they may not have been able to do business with before because they couldn't carry the kind of inventory cost. And 30 seconds after they click a button in our portal, they're paid. And the buyer doesn't even need to know about it. And at the same time, the buyer can decide, actually on that particular invoice, there's a seasonal invoice. I'm gonna make this a 120-day payment term instead of 60. The supplier is not impacted, and they're doing something similar for sort of the price of a credit card. So that's the real effort of what we're going to here. We want to see small business and the supply chain grow, become bigger employers in the community, and that's at our core why we're doing what we're doing.
Cool, excellent. And is out of interest, is that in the UK or are you also operating globally as well at the moment?
So UK is the focus right now, but Jack has already built for global business. We will release our payments product, which can transact in 58 currencies in April. So no, this is very much the world trades globally, and so the world needs a global solution to back up their financial operations.
Cool. Nicolai, it's been a pleasure to speak to you and Jack
Thank
as
you.
well. Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers, Rob.